What is up? I'm Brad Austin, and this is Touchline Episode 2, where we talk soccer. First thing I wanted to get into tonight is Real Salt Lake went into LA, played the Galaxy, and it's great to have Beckerman back and Ramondo back. And even though we did get that win at home, LA was a bigger test for us. So we got into LA, and what we learned there is our depth behind Salvario is not what we thought it was. We kind of have this idea that Plata can take that next step forward to be that guy. We also have the idea that we can sub in Devin Sandoval, and he's going to play the exact same as Salvario, maybe not giving you that goal scoring, but command that double team and deal with situations like that. We also was kind of hoping going into this season that Olmis Garcia would take that next step and become that next elite guy. We also thought Robbie Finley might be able to find, his old Robbie Finley self. He showed glimpses of it last year, but nothing to get you too excited for. What we did learn, though, is that Salvario is that important to us. And with this injury to him, we are looking at the future where we're going to have to get very creative in our goal scoring situations. We need to get a guy, one of our own, to step up and become that new threat and draw those double teams, because on set pieces, Salvario he'd have to be marked up with two guys. If he's not being marked up by two guys, he's going to score on you. We don't have that guy right now. So what we have is we have guys being put one-on-one with defenders. And if they're being put one-on-one, chances are our guys aren't going to be able to break free. With Salvario, he was able to draw a double team. So that gave you the chance to have a kind of a free roaming guy. And so it kind of hurt to not have Salvario back. There was also some calls that weren't exactly called, if you could say. And that's part of the MLS. It's the big problem with MLS is there's a lot of inconsistency when it comes to the officials. There was a foul late in the game where the ref told the players to play on. In another game, same situation, ref blows the whistle, gave the defender a red card, sent him off the field, and the other team got a penalty kick. Same type of foul, same situation, same area. The only difference is the ref, and it's been, inconsistent like that. So looking ahead, what we have coming up for us is this Saturday they'll get to play the Whitecaps, and then they'll follow it up by a Thursday game at home against Montreal, which is going to be, huge for us. We're able to get back home. We're able to play 3 games rather quickly after each other. I mean, we'll play a Saturday, a Thursday, and then a Wednesday game. And then after that, we'll be off for a couple days and travel to Colorado. So all of our games here in the next little while, after that, you got 2 more home games. And then you travel to Dallas. So the next 6 games is going to be a huge stand for us. And the reason I say that is you have, in the next 6 games, 5 of them at home. You're going to get in front of your home crowd. They're going to be there to support you. They're going to be loud. the Wednesday game against New York is actually going to be broadcast on ESPN2. So you'll have a national audience. It's a time for Real Salt Lake to kind of step forward with an attack and show that we can replace Salvo Rio, at least for the time being. And then even with that road game to Colorado, it's going to be a big game for us. We're going to be playing for the Rocky Mountain Cup, which, if you don't know what that is, inside, soccer is kind of like college football in a way. In college football, you have essentially, you know, the Holy War, BYU versus Utah. You have, you know, Alabama versus Auburn in the Iron Bowl. I think that's what it's called, is the Iron Bowl. But you have these rivalries, and they're factored onto different situations like that. Our big rival right now is Colorado Rapids, and that's, you know, based off of more or less our proximity to each other. But what they go ahead and do is they play 3 games a year anymore. For a while there, they were playing 2. They played as high as 4. But going into last year, what it was is they played 3 games, 1 at Rio Tinto, 2 at Dick's Sporting Goods Park, and it's aggregate. So what they go ahead and do is they'll just add up all the scores. And so, like, if we go down there and we beat them 3-0, we're up 3-0 in the aggregate. It's also a huge game in that sense because, you know, we've already played them once and beat them in May 2-1. And now we get to go into their place with a 1-goal lead for the Rocky Mountain Cup. And then after that, they have to travel back to us in September. So if Real Salt Lake can take a step forward, showing that we can have a better offensive performance, it's going to help us secure the Rocky Mountain Cup, which we've dominated it ever since it showed up. I mean, it started in 2005. Colorado won it for 2 years. And then after that, it went 6 years straight that we owned it, and then Colorado won it back last year. If there's a tie, they'll go to goal differential. If there's still a tie, they'll go to whoever the previous year winner was. They kind of don't hold. Prior to 2008, they kind of held away goals as a higher achieving goal. And what that is it just says that if you can go into your opponents and score on them, then it proves that you can. How am I going to say? If you score on them, it's worth more than scoring at home. So it kind of forced you to be a little bit more open with the way you played your games. So here in the next 5 games, it's time for Real Salt Lake to figure out their offensive problems. They're going to be playing Vancouver. They're going to be playing Montreal. They're going to be playing a star-studded team in New York. They're going to have the Rocky Mountain Cup. Then they have DC United at home, who has kind of turned a lot of heads, shocking a lot of people. It's a team that, you know, last year was one of the bottom teams, and this year they're up there fighting for a playoff spot. They're fighting for something. So it's kind of great to see them be doing that. And then after that, they'll have another home game against Seattle. And that's where the ultimate test is going to come from. They essentially have 5 games before they get that August 16th game against Seattle. And Seattle is a team that will play up with Real Salt Lake. They will play physical. They will be that thorn in the side of Real Salt Lake. And so looking ahead, essentially Real's got 3 games to get something figured out so they can go compete for that Rocky Mountain Cup. After that, they need to have things figured out because they will be playing Seattle. And when it comes to August, in August you're starting to play for playoff spots. You're starting to work up and down the table trying to get a better playoff spot because the season ends at the end of October. So mid-August, you only have 2.5 months. You're only playing 4 games a month on average, sometimes 5. When wins are worth 3 points, this is a crucial stretch right here where Real could either walk away with 0 points or they could walk away with 15 points before they play Seattle, and that's a huge jump into the standings because Seattle, in my eyes, is turned into that new rival for Real Salt Lake. I mean, looking right now anymore, it's 1A, 1-2 with 1A, 1B when it comes to Real and Seattle. And as it sits right now, they're 10 points ahead of us. If you can get that 15 points, that makes up a huge difference. And the only reason they're ahead so much is they have 12 wins on the season, whereas we only have 7. And in return, we have 7 ties that instead of their 2. So we have 10 points right there that we left on the table by getting a tie instead of getting a win. And it's games where stuff like that happens that comes back to haunt you. Like I said, this next crucial stretch is going to be huge for us because first we're going to start with Montreal. So we have Montreal at home. Vancouver at home. Vancouver is a playoff team if it started right now, but they're only 1 goal ahead of LA to be a playoff team. And they have played, 2 more games than LA. So LA essentially has 2 games to make up 1 point. They tie one of them. They, essentially tie Vancouver for the points. Tie the other one, they jump ahead. Or if they just win one of them, they overtake them. So Vancouver's a team fighting for a playoff spot right now. Montreal is sitting at the bottom. Montreal is a team that looks very bad on the road. They're -10 when it comes to goal differential on the road. They allow 10 more goals than they will score. Overall on the year, their goal differential is a -12. So it's a team that, they only average 0.82 goals a game. So they're going to average just under a goal a game, whereas Real averages about a goal and a half a game. Then you have New York coming in, who is a team that would be in the playoffs right now, but is fighting, with a win, they could be 3rd place. With a loss and a Columbus win, they could be out of the playoffs. That's how tight the Eastern Conference is right now when it comes to the playoffs. Then Real gets Colorado, who is currently sitting 3rd, and if everything still holds true, 3 points could be even bigger than the Rocky Mountain Cup. 3 points could essentially be the difference between, playing 2nd place game, being the 2nd place team and playing a playoff game, or being a 3rd place team and playing a playoff game. And honestly, looking at the teams that have a shot at it, it's either, if you ended up 2nd right now, you'd play Vancouver. But if you ended up 3rd, you're playing Dallas. And essentially, with Real's history in Dallas, you kind of want to avoid that. I know we kind of got over that hurdle. For the longest time, it was tough for Real to play in Dallas, or actually the state of Texas in general, and they had tough times going in and winning inside there. And so And then after that, you get the team that is the second best team in MLS and DC United. It's a team that has shocked a lot of people. The acquisition of, Eddie Johnson to that team has brought new life to its offense. And, it's that surge of energy that they needed, that now we can score goals, and our defense now has that confidence to shut down goals because they know, we're not playing for ties, we're playing for wins. And then you'll get Seattle, who is at the top of the standings. Like I said, if you can get that 15 points, even if you manage to get 10 points in the whole ordeal instead of the whole 15, and Seattle gets nothing, you push them into a tie. If not, you can push them to a point where you're sitting, a point or two back, and you go into your home stretch of the season, August through September, where you can prepare for that September 12th game in Seattle, knowing that probably everything's on the line, and after that you close out your season, playing Colorado, Vancouver, Chivas, San Jose, Portland, and then Chivas again. Right now, Real, if they can figure out how to score goals, should be able to catch Seattle, but if not, you're looking at playing playoff games against teams that Real typically doesn't have the greatest of history against. Their struggles in Texas, they've had struggles on turf, so a team like Vancouver's tough to play against. As customary with this podcast, is I answer a lot of questions, and so one of the questions I was asked was how, was about, like the salary cap and stuff like that. And what it is, recently there was okay, so we have, it's like a whole lot of other teams and leagues where we have big time school teams. Your franchise teams are going to be making a whole lot more of money than the smaller markets. And as you can see, like in the NBA, the San Antonio Spurs is able to compete because they draft well, they scout well, and they have a scheme. This is what our scheme is. So player A has to do this, player B has to do this, player C, D, F. This is your role. This is what you do. If you can't play within the system, we'll find somebody else to play within the system. And so what you have is another New York team coming in, and they signed a player for $8 million a year. And the question asked was, can Real Salt Lake do the same thing? Well, first it was, would RSL do stuff like this? And the other was, can RSL do stuff like this? Can RSL do stuff like this? Yes, they can, within a reason. So what it is they have it set up to where the salary cap is right around, I want to say about $3 million a year. I mean, it's not a whole lot, but it's what it is. And so what you do is, and they do it weird. I personally don't like the way they do it, but it kind of makes sense. And what they do is, players are given a base salary, and then they have, bonuses for when they signed and stuff like that, and it's added towards their salary. And so, they don't throw in, like goal scoring bonuses and stuff like that towards salary cap, only because you don't know, you can't go ahead and be like, all right, Luis Gill, we're going to give you, 10% of what your base pay is if you score for every 5 goals you scored, because you can't ensure that Luis Gill is going to score, 15 goals a season. You can't ensure that. So that doesn't count towards the cap until the end of the year. So what they go ahead and do is, I'll take, and I have it pulled up in front of me, where we'll go with Devin Sandoval. Makes $48,500 a year. That's his base salary. His guaranteed compensation is $48,000. Well, $48,500. That counts towards that $3 million, which it's more like 3.1, 3.2, something like that. But you get the point. So he is worth, $48,000 of the $3 million that they're allowed to spend. There's rules, though. There's the designated player rule, and it allows MLS franchises to sign players that would be considered outside of the team salary cap. So either by offering the player a higher wage or by paying the transferring fee. What a transferring fee is like in the NBA, if the Jazz called up the Lakers and said, okay, we want Kobe Bryant. And the Lakers would be like, okay, you got to give us Favors, Hayward, and the next 3 first-round picks. That's not how it works in soccer. In MLS, it works that way. They'll do trades and stuff like that. But not for most of the world. They don't play by the I'll trade you for somebody rule. What they play by is called transfers. And what a transfer is same scenario. The Jazz call up the Lakers. We want, Kobe Bryant. They'll turn around and be like, okay, you can have Kobe, but it's going to cost you $20 million. Jazz turn around, write out the Lakers a check for $20 million. But they don't send it to them yet. So all that essentially says is, we're going to give you $20 million, you send us Kobe. And all the Lakers promise to do is void Kobe's contract. In return, for the next short time, the Jazz is allowed to talk to Kobe and be like, hey, we want you here in Salt Lake. This is what we're willing to pay you. It pretty much turns into a negotiation. So they sit there and they talk about, we're willing to pay you X amount of dollars a year for this many years. Let's do it. And they sit there and talk and discuss and try to figure it out. And if they can come to a contract, then they will go back to the Lakers and, okay, so here's the deal. We are going to send you, Kobe Bryant for $20 million. We've agreed on a contract. Kobe has signed the contract. Once Kobe signs that contract, what happens is the Lakers release him, and all of a sudden that Jazz contract goes into effect. He is now a member of the Jazz, and the Jazz turn around and hand the Lakers $20 million check and say, see ya. That's how it works. That's how transfers works in a nutshell. There's a lot more that kind of goes into it. And when you start talking about these, these transfer fees, they kind of get a little outrageous. And I mean, crazy. I mean, the latest has been Gareth Bale, who went from Tottenham to Real Madrid. In the process, just to that initial transfer fee, was $146 billion, which comes out to right around, was what it, comes out to in American dollars. I mean, it was 85 billion, 85 million pounds. But throwing it through a converter, it says it came out to about $146 billion. Hence, it's not a it's where it gets kind of crazy. I mean, and with Garth Bale's transfer, it was actually for exactly 100 million euros, but when it got converted and everything, that's what it came down to. And so to play in this and to pay these transfer fees, it's very, very expensive. So where MLS teams aren't making a whole lot of money, this isn't, it's not feasible for them to go out and get big name stars like that, just because of how much it costs. There's been talks in the past, especially with like Clint Dempsey, and they never came out and said the full number, but whereas the MLS helped, actually they did, if I remember, yeah, it came out and it was 6 million pounds is what it cost, or maybe it was $6 million. Anyways, oh, I got it right here. It was a $9 million fee and $8 million in salary to see Dempsey return. And so the big thing going down is, the belief that a team like that couldn't pay for it, an MLS team couldn't pay for it because they're only given a $3 million salary cap. So the general rule there is they claim there's a lot of uproar talking about how, MLS helped pay that fee, and the MLS essentially paid that fee because they'd rather have Clint Dempsey, who's the American star soccer player, they'd rather have him playing in America, helping grow the sport. And so when his salary hit the books, his base salary is $4.9 million. After his compensations and everything like that, it's 6.69. But like I said, part of it is there's $8 million in salaries. So he's got, probably goal scoring situations where if you score X amount of goals, we'll give you, 5% of your base pay or something like that. So it has the chance to go up to 8. And so, his base pay is only almost $5 million. The cap is 3. And so what they did is they created when first, and it's nicknamed the Beckham rule because Beckham was the first one that started it. And it's called the designated player rule. And what happens is when Beckerman signed, he signed a 5-year contract with an annual guaranteed salary of $6.5 million. And so the team has to pay him that. At the time, though, if you were a designated player, only $400,000 of your salary would be charged to the salary cap, and the league helps pay for the salary cap. Anything extra at that time, had to be paid by the team's owner. So if Real Salt Lake wants to go out and get a guy like that and pay $8 million, at the time now, they've broken it down into age. So if you're over the age of 23, you'll carry $350,000. If you're 21 to 20, it's $200,000. If it's 20 years or younger, it's $150,000, and that's because they want to, bring in young international players and develop them to stars of the leagues and develop them into the stars of tomorrow. And so people are looking at MLS as, growing stars. Teams will start calling, and the sport grows because there's all these young guys that, high school kids, junior high kids, even kids younger than that can look up to this kid that's, 18 years old playing for FC Dallas. What they do is each team was originally given, I believe it was 2 designated players. And what you could do up until, I'd say about 4 years ago, is you could actually trade your designated player spot. And so what you could turn around and do is trade it to, part of the deal would be like, okay, FC Dallas calls us up and says, we want Luis Gil, and we're like, all right, give us player X, and we want one of your designated player slots. And so they'd send it back. They started to quit doing that because a lot of the teams kind of they didn't want teams to jump up there and just start stealing all these spots, and all of a sudden can have the star-studded team but only be paying them a certain amount, and then the owner be going bankrupt or something like that. So right now you're still only allowed 2 designated players, but if you want to pay a $250,000 luxury tax on top of it, you can sign a 3rd one. And what they do is they take that $250,000 and they look at all the teams that doesn't have a 3rd designated player. And so, like Real Salt Lake, and they'll split that entire. So they'll take all this money, say New York, LA, Seattle, and I'll throw in Colorado, even though I know they don't. Let's say those 4 teams say, we're all going to have a 3rd designated player, and they all throw it in, and that's $1 million. And then they look at the other teams that don't have it and say, okay, you guys do not have a designated player. Well, you don't have 3. You have 2. You're allowed to have 2. And so they turn around and take this $1 million and say all the teams that have 2 or less gets this additional money called allocation money. Allocation money is given to teams that have missed playoffs, expansion teams in their first season. If you have a player that transfers to a foreign club and there's a transfer fee that comes back, you're given that. If you play in the Champions League, like Real Salt Lake was doing, that's how Real Salt Lake was able to keep a lot of their core together, is because CONCACAF Champions League brought in that additional revenue. And then you can trade up, you have like what's called an off budget, where you have 10 roster spots that do not count against your roster, and they're generally used for guys that don't play up a lot, but you're trying to train them up, and so you can sell those spots so a team can have 10, or they can have 12 or 14 or however many they're willing to give money for, and the money is essentially used to you can pay non-designated players with it, so they don't count against your salary cap so high. You can actually pay designated players but you can only pay them down to a certain amount, and then after that you're not allowed to pay them anymore to reduce their salary hit against you. If his salary hit is over $350,000 because of his age, because he's over the age of 23, you can pay it down to that $350,000, and all of a sudden you get your designated player slot back. If you want to bring in a star from another league, you can use that money as part of your transferring fees, or you can just trade it for like draft picks, players, stuff like that. That's what Real generally used to do kind of in the past, is they would trade draft picks for allocation money, or they trade players that they didn't use a whole lot of for allocation money, and that was to keep their core intact so they could keep playing in the Champions League. So these guys, they do not count towards the salary cap. And like I said, it was originally called the Beckham rule. That's only because he was given a $250 million contract over 5 years. Essentially, he was paid $50 million. His guaranteed compensation from MLS and the Galaxy was 6.5. And so the Galaxy had to pay the rest of that out, and I mean, some of it came through like endorsement deals and stuff like that, because when he played with Real Madrid, his image was only 50%. He only made 50% off of what he, posters and stuff like that, or jersey sales or stuff like that. When he came to MLS, he was given 100%. So every jersey that was bought with his name on it, he got the money. The league didn't get it, LA didn't get it, but to them, losing that money was worth it in the end, because they were allowed to bring in a big name star. They were able to grow the sport. To them, that was worth the payoff. As it sits right now, there is 4 teams that have 3 designated spots. You have the Galaxy, then you have the Portland Timbers, the Seattle Sounders, and Toronto FC. Those are the only teams that has a designated players that they use all 3 spots. So they pay that additional amount. So there's $1 million that is split up between all the other teams. Real Salt Lake has both of theirs secured. So right now they have it secured in Salvario and Javier Morales. So that comes to the other half of the question. Can Real Salt Lake do it? Yeah, they can do it. But they're going to have to pay $250,000 if they wanted to keep Salvario or Morales. Would they do it? The new owner has came out and said that he's willing to spend money to make the team competitive and to keep the team competitive. So if he's willing to open the pocketbook and allow somebody like that to come in, yeah, it's possible. But remember, they're still having that hit against, the team salary, and so you're gonna have to cut, unless you can, bring in a young 20-year-old or younger who is able to, be that impact player coming straight out. When I was thinking about it, there was one that came to mind that I would love to see Real Salt Lake go out and get. He plays for the United States national team, and it's Julian Green. He's 19 years old, so he could count towards that lesser one against us. He could be able to play in the midfield on the wings. He could, essentially pair up with Luis Gil, even though I do like Mulholland and Sebastian and everything that we kind of have going for our wings. But Gil is a huge upgrade. You get him together. I mean, Green's a huge upgrade. You get him together with Gil, and they're allowed to play together. That kind of helps your national team going forward, and you can, hope that he's playing well. The thing is, though, is he's playing for a top flight German team. So his transfer fee is going to be huge. If he does come over, it's not going to be to Real Salt Lake. I mean, I'd love to have him on the team. The only reason he won't come over is MLS is going to help pay that transfer fee. And I in my eyes, they're going to send him to an LA. They're going to send him to a New York, maybe to even Orlando. And that's the only reason they're going to do that is because they want to build the sport. They're going to throw him in a big market where they can publicize off him a ton. And so it's not practical for Real Salt Lake to be doing something like that. I mean, you'll end up losing a few players in the process. I mean, to take that, you know, even if you went and got an aging guy, 300 plus going through here, you know, to hit that number, you might axe off a few of your guys, but you're going to have to axe off a big name or two. So you're looking at essentially losing a Kyle Beckerman, a Nat Borchers, a Tony Beltran, a Luis Gill, Ned Grabavoy, which he might be on the outside looking in. You might consider that for him. Robbie Finley is one I would consider it for. I mean, if you can get younger for that, it's a little bit better suited. Finley is good, good, you know, to replace. You also might even lose, you know, a Nick Raimondo, a Chris Schuler, a Chris Wingard. So if you go out and get a guy like that, you're going to lose a stable guy. You're going to lose one of your core guys. And so can they do it? Yeah. Would they do it? My guess is no. This team also loves to not build around stars. They love to just build a team and build a team to compete. And so I don't think that they would ever do that. Another question that was asked was about Nick Raimondo, and the question asked was, you know, how many more years do I see Raimondo playing, or how much more life does Raimondo have? Raimondo right now is 35 years old. You know, Tim Howard is the same age as him. So if Howard makes it to the next World Cup, Raimondo can make it. If Raimondo can make it, Howard can make it. But for the sake of things, you know, they're both going to be right around 39. It's not, you know, ideal. And that's only because it's a sport. They're both, you know, aging, stuff like, and things like that. I mean, the last starting goalkeeper before Howard retired at the age of 38. So Howard, if he plays as long as he did, he's going to retire from the national teams about the time the United States qualifies. After that, I mean, Casey Keller played another, he played until about his 40s. I want to say he was 40, 41, but he wasn't playing for the national team. So could Howard play to that point? Yeah. Could Raimondo play to that point? Yeah. That's the thing, though, is how long do they want to play? How much, you know, playing goalie is very physical. I mean, you wouldn't think it because they sit inside that box and they play that way. And you know, you're like, they don't run a whole lot and stuff like that. But when you really get into it, there's a lot of jumping, a lot of turning, a lot of, you know, a lot of the big injuries are knee injuries to guys because they tear ACLs because they turn one way and their knee turns the other way, or they do a whole lot of jumping, penalty kick. I mean, not penalty kicks, corner kicks, set pieces. You know, I played soccer growing up, and one of the things I was told was, you know, get in there and mess with the goalie. You know, and so, you know, put a shoulder into him or something like that. Let him know that he can't, even though it's his box, that you're not going to go in there and just respect it. And so, guys, goalies are getting beat up on. So it all depends on how much they can take, which I'm not sure if they, how much physical beat they can take. If Raimondo can hold on, Raimondo's probably got another, you know, 4 or 5 years left in him. And so I'm hoping another 4 years. I'd love to see him play in another World Cup. I'd love to see Beckerman play in another World Cup. but for practicality, you kind of have to look at it and be like, well, it's not their time. I mean, everybody thought Landon Donovan had one more left in him. And yeah, Klinsmann is kind of the reason why he didn't make it to this one, but he's only 32. Romano's older than him, and this was also kind of considered, you know, Landon's last chance at a World Cup. And so the last thing I wanted to get into is I kind of wanted to get you guys involved into something. Actually, before I get into that, there was one other question asked, and that was about, you know, Americans playing abroad and how successful they are. There is a ton of Americans playing, you know, outside of America. A lot play in Mexico. Some get to go play in, you know, the Premiership League. Josie Altidore is currently playing there. You have Jeff Cameron is playing in the Premiership. Who else is playing? Brad Guzan, who is the backup goalie for the United States, is playing for Aston Villa. Tim Howard plays for Everton. You know, just going down through this list, just looking at guys. I mean, there's tons of guys that play in, you know, the big time Premiership League, which is kind of the where you want to be kind of type thing. And so, you know, a lot of them go overseas, a lot of them get a lot of playing time, which is great. It's awesome to see you guys get playing time like that. One story when I was asked the question about how successful they are, I mean, I don't think a whole lot has won titles, but there was one guy who, you know, I played defense growing up. Defense and some midfield, but mostly defense. And there was two players I always looked up to, and one was Onweyu, who was a United States national team's player. And what he did is, after the 2006 World Cup, it would have been right around 2009, AC Milan calls him up and offers him a 3-year deal. I mean, he only played out a year and a half of it, never got to play or anything like that, and that was only because he was dealing with knee injuries. He was playing for the national team and got hurt, and so it was kind of tough for him to make that recovery back, and also didn't help that he got in a fight with a teammate during training. They turned around and loaned him out. He went off on this loan, made a few starts, and then there was a free transfer, which is when they're like, hey, we want Onweyu. Okay, take him. Okay, and so he went off to another team. And so he never got to play in Italy so much at the top level of Italian football. But, I mean, he only appeared in one match for them, and it was a Champions League match, so it wasn't even playing against the top Italian competition. It was playing against, you know, a Champions League. And but he went ahead and he never got to play, but it was so cool because at the time there was huge news made about how he was the first American to play in Italy, and it was in some crazy like 15-20 years, and it just shows that, you know, how much our sport was growing. because we were getting recognized in some of these top situations, and because of injuries, he wasn't allowed to play. And so there is, some Americans playing abroad and playing big time minutes, and it'd be great to see them make it to the next level and be playing there, be successful at it, be a threat. I think Jozy Altidore kind of proved when he was playing in the Dutch leagues that he could be an all-time player and play a style of play that would allow him to thrive in the league. I mean, he's now in England. He's not finding the same feet under him that he was there. And you also saw that on the national team, so you're not sure if he's going through a funk or what exactly is going on there. So Americans have played abroad, but Americans haven't succeeded as well as we would like them to. The thing I wanted to get you guys a little more active into is, next year you have 2 franchises that are coming in. And so what the MLS does is called an expansion draft. Real Salt Lake was part of this back in 2004. So it was in November 2004, and what they do is they take all the MLS teams and they have to submit a roster and saying, we want these 11 players. And so what they go ahead and do is they'll look at Real Salt Lake and be like, okay, give us a list of your 11 players that are protected. You can't choose developmental people, so if they're a homegrown person or a Generation Adidas or anybody like that, they can't be protected, but they're protected in the sense of the league won't allow them to leave, and that's only because the team took the time to develop them. The team didn't, buy them and the guy struck gold. These are guys that, they took when they were, 16 years old and have been training them to play at an available level. What they go ahead and do is everybody who's left over is they will throw them out there and say, you can have Nat Borchers is exposed, and so when Orlando goes to pick or New York goes to pick, they can look at this exposed list and be like, okay, we want this person. In the past, there has been certain rules behind it, whereas if one of our, let's say that Orlando goes, okay, we want Nat Borchers because he's exposed. What Real can do is say, okay, you can take him, and then we'll look at their exposed list and be like, but now this player's protected. And he wasn't allowed to lose more than 3 players. So if, New York selects 3 Real Salt Lake players, Real's now out of the draft, and they can't lose anybody else. And this is a way to, help teams. There was rules, whereas if you selected a developmental guy that you kind of brought up but lost that Generation Adidas status or wasn't considered homegrown anymore and he was exposed, if you selected him, he had to be a starter or he had to be a substitute. He had to play significant time. You could not, select him and start trying to build him up within your system. He had to play. Back in 2004 when it took place, Real Salt Lake had an okay draft. And the biggest name that stands out to everybody is that first pick. For Real Salt Lake, they had the second pick. Chivas was selecting at the same time. And Real Salt Lake went out and got current coach Andy Williams. And we all know, how big of a presence Andy Williams has had on this team. In the past few years, Real has lost. They exposed Jason Kreis in 2006, and they lost him. He went in the 7th pick. but they turned around and they traded allocation money to Toronto and was able to keep Jason Kreis. That was huge for us because now, Jason turned around, became our coach, led us to a title, built the team the team to what it is now. In 2007, you had San Jose come in. We didn't lose any players there. In 2008, you had Seattle show up. We lost Nate Sturgis with the second pick. In 2009, you had Philadelphia come in, and we didn't lose any players there. And then, 2010, we had Vancouver and Portland come in. We lost David Horst. Robbie Finley went to Portland. In 2011, we had Montreal, and they selected Colin Warner. And so, it's going to be, towards the end of the season, it's going to be tough because you have up until about 2 days before the draft. So what I want to hear from you guys over the next week is who is your, it doesn't have to be over the next week or so, just in the next few days, take a couple weeks if you need to. Who is the 11 players on Real Salt Lake that you feel that the team should protect? And here's the situation that I keep running into when I put my team together. It's, okay, I know who I want to protect because moving forward, this is guys that it's going to build upon. But like I said, you've got Beckerman, you got Raimondo, who are both aging. You got some other guys that are aging. Do you run the risk of exposing them and worry more about your youth coming forward and worry about your youth so much as in, do we worry about, our future and keep the presence we have going for us right now and hope that they can bring us another title, or do we just look at our youth and move forward with it? I mean, in the past, we've exposed a few guys that was kind of shocking to me, at least, that we exposed. In this last one, Dead Grabber Boy, I was kind of shocked that they threw him out there, but going down through the list, the guys they protected was key to our core. So, take your time, think about it, and shoot me, a message and let me know who's the 11 guys that you would want to see Real Salt Lake protect. I'm hoping to get a buddy on to talk more about the expansion draft, the thought process that Real should be going through with it, and hopefully we can either see a consensus or at least get some reasoning behind, do we have this core intact right now to win a title? Go out and win that title, so who do we protect? Do we keep that core intact, or do we look at our future and hope that there's a new core there and risk throwing out and losing a Beckerman or a Luis Gill, even though I think he's part of the future, or you might even be losing a Nat Borchers, a Javier Morales, or who do you throw out there? And so and with that, thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week. Remember to always send in questions, and we will go through them each time. And I thank you, and good night.